So a couple of days ago, we uploaded a video where we built a cheap, surprisingly little capable gaming rig for $500. But as fun as putting it together and filming the whole process was, we couldn't just leave it there, which is why in this video, we're going to explain why we decided to put together a system like this, why we chose the parts we did, and decided not to include a dedicated GPU, in case you don't notice the empty space right there. And then we'll also take a look at how much 720p butt it can kick in games. But first up, we decided to put this system together because we can. So we've been meaning to do more builds on the channel for a while now, since we love working with hardware and making that hardware look as dope as possible. Big ups to Rikus for editing that last one. Ooh, it looks so good. But we didn't want to focus the builds around different price points, since that's been done nearly to death. Instead, we decided to build rigs dedicated to running certain games at various resolutions and 60 FPS. That's the thing that we were going for, 60 FPS gaming. So we started with 720p. We had plenty of people point out that, oh, this can run 1080p. You're right, it can, but it can't run 1080 60. It can run 720 60 in a lot of games. So that's what we went with, 720p. This is our entry for the 720p build. And 720p isn't the prettiest of resolutions, but it is technically HD, but it's a decent entry point for anyone looking to get into PC gaming on the cheap, or just wants to play some of the major esports titles at okay frame rates. Our 720p rig is built with all of that in mind, but is a little overkill because it also accounts for future upgradability. We had plenty of people say that you would have done differently, you would have bought a GPU, but we chose to build it the way we did for a very specific reason. So let's get into specs and why you're all wrong. At its heart, the 720p build features AMD's Ryzen 5 2400G. It's 4 cores, 8 threads, 3.9 gigahertz max boost clock, and a super low price of just $158. It made it a no-brainer for this build. Even though many games, including modern ones, likely won't make use of all of those threads, some will. And as more and more games that are optimized for it start to come out, the 2400G should have you more than covered. But if we're being entirely honest here, we chose the 2400G primarily because of its integrated Vega 11 graphics. We could have picked up a 7700K with the same core and thread count with a higher clock speed, but the integrated graphics on those suck. So in our review, we were surprised at just how capable this iGPU actually is. At 720p, it ran almost all of the games we threw at it at 30 to 60 FPS and more, and it even ran some games smoothly at 1080p. So this meant that we didn't need to splurge on a graphics card, which is great because even though they're more affordable now than they've been in a very long time, they're still too overpriced to actually consider for a build like this. And dropping down the processor to include a lesser graphics card than you could potentially do in the future didn't make as much sense to us as just sucking it up for a while, running with the iGPU, running with the Vega 11 graphics, and then hopefully down the line getting something that can actually handle 1080p or 1440p 60 FPS a lot better. Because in our mind, this build was about compromises and sacrifice. You're sacrificing the comfortability now of having, say, something like a 750 Ti or an RX 560 for the sake of potentially getting a 1060, 1070 Vega 56 later on down the road. You suck it up, you play everything at 720p, 60 FPS right now, and then hopefully in the future you can upgrade to a new graphics card when they become more affordable. It's the sacrifice of actually pushing aside your current wants and desires to have something better later on, which we are definitely okay with, especially with the AM4 socket support that AMD is going to have until 2020. Like, the 2400G is just something that we can absolutely stand behind. So let's talk about the motherboard. While there are other cheaper options available, especially if you don't mind going mini ITX, we decided to plop the 2400G into ASUS's Prime B350 Plus motherboard. We've used this particular board extensively in the past, and it does everything you need it to do and just a little bit more. We also chose it because it leaves a lot of room for future upgradability, because it has 4 DIMM slots, it has plenty of PCI Express ports, so if you want to do an SLI build, or if you want to have an add-on card for Wi-Fi later on down the road, or a dedicated sound card, or maybe one of those new Samsung ASICs that are supposed to be PCI Express based, then you can totally slot that in there, and then you don't have to stick with the amount of RAM that you have because you can upgrade. It's not just like one of those smaller boards that could potentially only give you 2 DIMM slots. This has tons of room for future upgradability. It has 6 SATA ports. Everything that you could possibly need fits on this board, and for a decently low price. Now, while this might be decently priced, RAM sure as heck isn't. It's super overpriced. We really wanted to grab a 16GB kit of 3200MHz DDR4 since Ryzen loves that speedy RAM, but since those are selling for at least 1/4 of a soul right now, we settled on an 8GB kit of Csgo's Ripjaws 5 series running at 2666MHz. Now I know many of you are screeching into your monitors about how 8GB of RAM isn't enough, but you're wrong. 8GB of RAM is totally fine for most games, especially the ones this system is geared for. But because we know that some of you will need more headroom, we chose the Prime B350 board, partly because it features 4 DIMM slots, as I mentioned previously, so that upgrading should be a breeze. And then also the speedier RAM was just more expensive and couldn't really fit into the price to performance aspect of this build. We actually went equally minimal on the storage front, only including a single 120GB Mushkin Source SSD. It's enough to house your operating system, as well as like 3 to 4 esports titles, but you'll definitely need to invest in a hard drive sometime down the road. But to keep costs low and to keep this focused on purely being a gaming build, we only went with 120 gigs. Now your needs could be something different. If you need this for school and for gaming, you could absolutely upgrade to a hard drive very quickly, but we wanted to give you the speed to load into games quickly, but then at the same time keep costs low. So 120 gigs for just 720p esports titles made sense to us here. But then we also chose our power supply with upgradeability in mind. We picked Superflower's 550 watt 80+ silver fully modular PSU, which provides more than enough power for this system. And when you eventually do invest in a graphics card, it'll power any one of them out there. You might not be able to get a 1080 Ti or a Vega 64, but a reasonable 1070 Ti will absolutely run on this 550 watt power supply. It's also slightly efficient with the 80+ silver, that it's fully modular, so you can have all of the cables tucked away, the ones that you're not using, and you can just keep this super clean. Love it so much. And then Superflower, because they're a great manufacturer that Wootware sells. If you're going to be replicating this build, the chances that you're going to be able to buy a Superflower if you're not in South Africa or a region that sells them, like the US, I can't find any there, then an EVGA could do you just as well, because Superflower does OEM for EVGA sometimes. So the case we chose for this build was another area where we splurged a little. Sure, we could have gone for a cheaper, less RGB-ified case without a tempered glass window, but we really didn't want to. Phantex's P300 Eclipse is phenomenally eye-catching, and it surprisingly only comes in at $60, and its modern style ensures that it'll look just as good in 2 to 5 years as it does now. And then the amount of space, the interior space that it has for any build that you potentially want to do, like this can fit a full-length 1080 Ti on here, no problem. And then the power supply basement keeps everything looking gorgeous. You don't have to hide any cables, they're just automatically hidden. We're gonna come out with a review on this, but I cannot tell you how impressed everybody in the office was with the P300. It's sleek, it's clean, it's minimal, and it's gorgeous. It's great. And it also comes in black and white, so if you want a white interior, you can totally get that too. Okay, now that we've looked at what's in this budget beast and everyone moaning about it, not including a graphics card, you know, you've gone off to fly some kites, it's time to play some games on this thing. 720p GGEC! So in order to really put the system through its paces, we loaded it up with Csgo, Dota 2, Fortnite, and PUBG for the lulz. These are likely the kinds of games anyone building a similar system will be hoping to play, so they're the only ones we tested and also the only ones we could fit on the drive. We tried to go for GTA 5 and Assassin's Creed Origin. There's just not enough space. You have to delete games if you actually want to play a AAA title, unless it's a lower end AAA title. But to install Shadow of War, they're like, you need 108 gigs. No chance, because that's more than that's available. First up to bat was CSGO, and because I'm the second worst CSGO player ever, the worst being an alternate universe version of me that sucks even more than I do, I asked Rikus to handle this one. He owns an MGO and he's pretty good at this game. So he played a few matches at 720p with medium details and reported that it was a pretty smooth experience. He considers anything lower than 300 frames per second in CSGO to be literally unplayable, so that's relatively high praise. The benchmarks we took while he was playing showed an average of 107 FPS. Not bad, it doesn't have a graphics card. So next up was Dota 2, which we also ran in 720p with medium details. While it wasn't the most crisp Dota experience we've ever had, the game did really run well and averaged around 82 FPS. You could probably bump a few of those settings to high and bring it down to that nice 60 mark. But next in line was the game that inspired this build, Fortnite. The game's cartoony graphics graphics ensured that it should run okay on almost any system. I mean, it runs on iPhone, so like a Vega 11 should totally trounce that, and it proved to be the case here. The game had no problem staying above 60 FPS at medium settings, averaging 69 FPS. That one's for you, G-Max. And then PUBG was a bit of a long shot. It doesn't exactly run flawlessly on even the most powerful systems around, even with our 1080 Ti Threadripper system, so we weren't exactly expecting a playable experience. But surprisingly enough, we got a playable experience. The game ran at an average of 45 FPS, and if it weren't for the absolutely horrific connection issues, thanks South Africa, that we experienced while playing it, I definitely would have walked away with the chicken dinner, and not because I suck at the game terribly, like anybody on stream might have noticed. So, the system has already proven to be everything we wanted it to be, but it actually has even more to offer. So during our testing, we actually ran the system entirely at stock settings, including RAM, running at only 1866 because that was the default for the BIOS. Once we actually set our kit to run at its rated 2666 megahertz, which you should totally do, kids, we retested PUBG and Fortnite, and both saw an increase of 10 FPS, which just goes to show you that actually high-speed RAM makes a huge difference for APUs. So if you're gonna be buying RAM, make sure that it's the fastest that you can afford in your budget if you're going with no graphics card. Honestly, we didn't expect this build to be as good as it actually was. We did run into a few issues, but nothing that was so outstanding that we wouldn't recommend building something similar to this. But for the performance and upgradeability being the biggest thing here, and it's really decent looks and a more than decent price, this system offers enough to make us forget about any of those issues and absolutely think that if you built something similar, you could be 100% happy with a 2400G basically powering everything that you need until you can afford a graphics card on down the line. None of that mentions just how dope Wootware is for actually sending over every single part that we used in this build, from the motherboard to the RAM to everything else. They're goodies supplied by Wootware. So if you're in South Africa and you're looking to build a dope 720p, 1080p, 1440p, doesn't even matter, dope PC, Wootware has the selection, the price, and the tremendous customer service team to actually help you make that a reality. I cannot stress how amazing they are, and I'm not even being paid to say that. They just sent over all of the parts. Wootware are the greatest. I love them so much. So if you're in South Africa, check them out. Link will be in the video description, wootware.co.za. So with that being said, be sure to smash that like button. If you enjoyed this video, please get subscribed and ring that little notification bell to stay up to date on all of our tech-related content. Also, please, we want to hear your feedback. Are these the types of videos you would like to see us doing more of going forward? We have this little series planned out, 720p through 4K, and then after that we can experiment with other things, but we want to hear from you. Is this something you want? Give us other thoughts, other feedback, things that you want us to be doing down in the comments, and we will be sure to keep that in mind. Anyways, I'm Brett with the UFD Tech channel. Thank you so much for watching. We are now on our way to Computex, which is going to be dope too. Big thanks to Wootware for sending. They sponsor us and they send us laptops. It's gonna be great. Computex is gonna be great. I'm super excited. Anyways, I'll see you all in the next video. Cheers.